Any questions or comments? I'm going to sort of move on to something that might help us to, I hope, see what we can do. I've spent considerable time describing where we are, what's going on here, okay? I'd like to maybe, before we say goodbye this weekend, say, what can I do now? Okay? I answered some interesting questions this week. But I would like to move on to something where maybe we could see what there is to do about this. So, any questions or comments about where I am? Okay. Can you see that perhaps this is kind of an accurate description of me? I know that we don't believe it's the whole description. I know that. That's fine. You'll find out. But that at least as far as it goes, it's pretty accurate, huh? Any questions about it? Holdouts, things you think just don't make sense, stuff you'd like to add into it that you think is missing, anything at all? I'm really going to look at the same picture just in a slightly different way. The only way I really know to do this is to kind of like do it by analogy, but I got to tell you the parable is so close to the truth, because that's my kind of parable, okay? It's not take something really far away, but take something really close. But I don't know how to say this like flat out, so I'll draw a little picture that's pretty close to the truth. And let's say that this is the awareness. All right? The awareness finds itself in the body. It makes a few decisions about what life is about. It's all about getting back to non-disturbance again. The awareness makes some decisions about how to go about that, and constructs for itself a prison to live in for the rest of its life. Builds it with its own two hands, very lovingly, with great attention to detail. And what it ends up with is a little room that it sits in for the rest of its life. Rather than a prison, I like to call it a closet. Because here's this little kid that basically got shut in a closet. You've heard about some kids that happens to, their parents get to the point where they realize they just don't like having the kid, but they can't get rid of it because that's sort of frowned on in this society. So they just stick it in the closet somewhere and close the door. And that's basically what we've all done to ourselves. We built our own closet, we built our own door, and we closed it with our own two hands. And we set in charge of this life the personality and said, you take care of this life for me because I can't bear it. It's just too upsetting to me. I can't bear it here. That sounds kind of familiar. And so it says to the personality, you live for me. And I hope that it won't hurt so much if you do that. But of course, it does, doesn't it? You can barricade yourself inside that closet if you like, thinking that somehow the pain will be lessened if this personality buffers you from it. Isn't that right? But the fact is that the personality creates a whole new set of pains, doesn't it? And so now I started out being a little bit disturbed by just things as they are, And I created a whole lot of disturbance for myself called personality, which torments the hell out of me, doesn't it? The funny thing is that while I say that Earth is kind of a disturbing place, it ain't that bad. We've made it into a living hell. But the place itself really isn't that bad, you know. It's a little disturbing. But by constructing this little cage and saying, you do it for me, we've made every little disturbance into a life-threatening emergency. And it becomes just the biggest drama you'd ever want to see. So every little thing that could have disturbed me for a couple minutes disturbs me for years, over and over again, you see. Now, the difficulty with this neat little idea we came up with, that maybe if I retreat back into myself somewhere, I'm calling it a closet, okay, but it's back somewhere inside, and I set the personality up out here to deal with everything, and it's supposed to buffer me, you see, it's kind of a reasonable idea, isn't it? You'd think that would work. But the difficulty with it is that all that happens is now I can't get what I need anymore because I'm stuck behind a barricade called the self. So I'm not getting what I need now. Everything has to go through the personality to get to me because that's the way I set it up. That's the way I wanted it. I was hoping the personality would keep all the pain, you see. But I know the personality can't do that. All the pain gets through, doesn't it? And it hands me a whole lot more that it just makes up all by itself. Just makes up reasons to have pain, doesn't it? Just makes up weird ideas and opinions and so forth about how terrible everything is, and now that bugs me, doesn't it? Things that aren't even there. So I now no longer am getting what I need. If I were out here and things could get to me, I might have gotten some of the stuff that I need to help me grow up with, but I'm only being fed by the personality, by what it feels like giving to me, you see. So maybe there's a little slot here under the door, and what I've had done is the personality passes things that it thinks that I should get through that little slot in the door. Now, do you suppose the personality knows what you need? Or are you sort of starving to death in that closet? You think the personality knows what a being needs? You think it can feed you properly? Do you know what you need? Do you know what is proper food for you on the inside? Do you know what that is? You see, if you can't answer that question, then what makes you think you're getting it when you let the personality be the one to give it to you? If the personality don't know, how's it supposed to give you what you need? So we're just like one of those little kids on the inside. The parents decided they didn't like having a kid, you see. So they shoved it in a closet, and we all weep for those little kids, isn't that right? We all think that's just so terrible when we hear about it. When for some reason or another that's discovered that some weak little malnourished kid who got fed, every few days through a crack in the door finally gets let out, and we hear about it, and we all just think that's the most terrible thing there is. And yet somehow it don't bother us too much when we do it to ourselves. Because that's exactly the state that we're in. You don't even know what's going on around you. All you get is what the personality chooses to tell you. And that's all opinions, beliefs, things you read in a book, stuff other personalities told you. You don't even know what's going on. I talk a lot about the necessity for experience, okay? That you can't do it with thought alone. You need to actually get the experience. We were talking out there a little while earlier that I could read all the books in the world that I want on driving a car or flying a plane. But I bet you don't want to take my first drive or my first flight, do you? You want to do that? If all I've done is read books, you want to be with me the first time I fly a plane? No, sirree. Now, isn't that interesting that we'll sit here and say, no, I wouldn't do that, and yet we'll go on thinking that you can get it by thought and words and concepts, you see. And the sad thing is that as long as this situation is set up, you're not even experiencing your life. So to be real blunt, since I'm good at that, might as well do it again. Most of your life to this point has been wasted because there's nobody experiencing it. So all the things that you could have experienced that could have helped you to grow as a living being have just been thrown away because the personality didn't bother to give it to you. Because maybe that's one of the things that you need. Maybe that's one of the foods for a living spirit is experience. Except they didn't give it to you. They gave you words. They gave you opinions. They gave you beliefs. They gave you thoughts. They gave you angers, hatreds, resentments, fears, apathies, depressions. They gave you everything but the experience itself. Isn't that right? That's what we get. A bunch of intellectual garbage and a bunch of emotional garbage. That's our food. If you let the knot eyes feed you through that door. I think it might be nice to come out of that closet and say, you know what, I bet it's going to hurt. I went into the closet because it hurt. Isn't that right? That's why I went in there, because it hurt here. That's just the way it is. I wish that I could say something different. But that's the way it is. I went in there because it hurt. I couldn't bear it. So if I'm going to come out, I'm just going to have to kind of accept it's going to hurt. Because I doubt if the things that were so upsetting to me before went away. I bet they're still out there. I remember real clearly when I was a teenager. I'm one of those people who's real sensitive to feelings, you know. Boy, is that a miserable gift. We have a saying around here that much of the time a gift is a curse until it's understood. Well, that's one of them. Being sensitive is a real curse until you kind of catch on and understand it, okay? So I walked around basically like a bloody wound everywhere I went. Not only did I have my own inner anguish to deal with, but I got to deal with everybody else's too. Everywhere I went, all I could feel is everybody else being full of inner anguish, you see. And the bad thing about that particular gift is because we're kind of subjective as people, we imagine that it's all about us. So if I walked into a room and a few people were upset, I figured it was because I was there. Now, I doubt if that was true, but that's the way it seems when you imagine that everything is about you, right? You walk around feeling everybody else is upset, and you figure it's because of you. So at a certain point in my life, I just turned off feelings. Now, of course, you can't really do that. What you do is you retreat into the mind, you pretend like you don't have feelings, you see. And that's what I did. And somewhere in the teen years, I kind of looked and I said, what have I done? I don't even know what I'm feeling anymore. If somebody says, hi Phil, how do you feel? I sit there and go, I don't know. I've got to be feeling something. Because you can't live in a body without feelings. They just happen. They're just little chemicals, that get released based on the way that you value things. You can't turn them off. You can't stop them, okay? They got to be there, but I don't know what they are anymore. I don't even know what I'm feeling. And I said, I'm in trouble. I built a wall around myself that I thought would protect me. Except now I can't relate to anyone. Because that's where we relate, isn't it? Is on a feeling level. That's what makes you feel or get the impression that you've got company, isn't it? Not because you talk. Well, that's fun to exchange ideas and so on. I agree. I like doing that. But what gives you the sense of companionship is on a feeling level, isn't it? No matter how beautiful and stimulating the ideas are that you give to each other, what gives you the sense of company is that feeling you get. And I couldn't have it anymore. And I said, I don't know if the price that I paid to not hurt is worth it. Except, I don't know how to tear these walls down. Because I don't know what I'm feeling anymore. I'd gotten far enough along that the obvious way to tear it down is to start being honest about how you feel, right? Then you could maybe make it okay to have feelings again, even if they were a little unpleasant. Except I didn't know anymore. I'd managed to create such a state of ignorance. That's all I could do was pretend like they weren't there. I didn't know what to do. I tell that story just to illustrate this idea of the armor that we think the personality is going to be. Because I know that story is not all that uncommon. I've met many other people who tell me, I don't have feelings. And I know they're in the same state that I was in. They're lying. I know you cannot live without feelings. That's part of what we do is have emotions or feelings, okay? But I think they probably did the same thing I did. They hid them so well that they can't find them anymore, okay? And it took considerable effort over a pretty long period of time to even know what I was feeling after I became aware of this little difficulty I'd made. Just to say, hey, I know what I'm feeling. And of course, in the beginning, they were pretty unpleasant things. Didn't stay that way forever, thank God. But it was that way in the beginning, because that's what I'd run from, was pain. Okay?
So you used the option of numbing it out, rather than, was it a numbness you felt? You said you tried to...
I didn't feel anything. Numbness would have been preferable. I didn't know what I was feeling. I felt nothing at all. It had to be some intense emotion before I could even tell what it was. I could get pissed. That's about it. Something really intense. I got depressed a lot too. I felt that occasionally, okay, but that's about it. The rest of the time I had no idea. All up here, all ideas, thoughts. I had lots of thoughts about feelings. Well, I should be feeling this, but I didn't feel it. It don't matter. It's just something that, it's called, there's a technical term for it in psychiatry, okay? It's not that uncommon. It's called dissociation. Okay? So what? But I think we're all in that state, maybe not quite as dramatically as that. In that we're being buffered from the experience. All right? We're having only the non-eyes thoughts and emotions and their opinions and their beliefs on what's going on. We are not experiencing the actual events of our own lives. The not eyes are. And they give me only their opinions on the subject. And we don't even really know sometimes what's going on. Honestly. I listen to people's descriptions sometimes of what's going on, and it's just not accurate. Okay? The first thing to do if you're in this interesting predicament is to accept the fact that if you want out of this closet, and you don't have to come out, many people spend their entire lives in it, the personality is perfectly capable of simulating a human being. Okay? So you can just stay there and have what appears to be a normal life. Except there's no one home. But since you're not home, you'll never know there's no one home. Because only somebody who comes out of that closet can maybe tell whether or not somebody else is in a closet or not, you see. How would you know? You haven't experienced it since you were probably 3 or 4 years old, what it's like to be here. But anyway, one of the first things, unfortunately, that we really need to do if we want to come out is to say, I suspect that the first thing I'm going to experience is going to be unpleasant. Because I bet you anything that whatever I ran from all those many years ago is probably still there. Because I never dealt with it. I never made my peace with it. I never said I'm free to experience that. I have not for however many years I've been since I was a little one, okay? So I bet that experience is still there, and I bet it's still going to bug me. But maybe this time I can use a little information to do something with it besides say, I can't experience so much pain. Maybe that's not true. Maybe I've grown up a little bit. Maybe it was true when I was 3 or 4. It may have been absolutely true then, Maybe I couldn't have dealt with that. I mean, you know, the truth is most of our family lives are pretty miserable, aren't they? And even if it's kind of pretty on the outside. For most of us, that experience is kind of tough. And maybe it was true. There were some things going on that I just couldn't handle. Maybe it wasn't family life. Maybe it was something that happened outside of the family, you know. Because that's another thing that's pretty true, isn't it? Little kids are nasty. They're just nasty to each other, aren't they? They just merge into these little gangs that just beat the hell out of each other, whether it's the kind that we're looking at these days, you know, where it's organized gangs with guns and knives, or just the little kids on the playground, right? There's really not that much difference, except now they organize a bit more frequently and, you know, run around in the same clothes and do it that way. But we all went through the gang experience, didn't we? Whole group of people standing over there pointing at you and say, look at that piece of nothing. So I don't know, maybe it wasn't a family, it was whatever it was. But maybe that little kid really couldn't handle the experience. But you're not that little kid anymore. Okay? On the inside, I sort of still am. But I have sort of grown up a little bit, you know. I'm not quite 3 or 4 now, maybe 5 or 6, 7 or 8. Okay? Maybe an 8-year-old can handle what a 5-year-old couldn't. So what if it took me 30 years to get from 5 to 8? Okay? But I think if we're not honest with ourselves and say, it's probably going to happen, because that's what I did with that wall against the emotions. I said, you know, I know why I did this now that I've become aware of it again. I know why I did this, because the emotions were so horrible. I couldn't deal with them. Okay, fine. But now I'm a 15-year-old. Boy, I'm getting old. Maybe I could handle it now, but I didn't hide the fact. If I did manage to break down that wall, what I was going to find was some real unpleasant stuff. That's why I built it. I just said, I paid too big a price for my safety. I may be safe from all those horrible emotions, but the price I paid is I am now alienated from every other human being on planet Earth. I cannot feel close to anyone. And that's too much to pay. I'd rather hurt, because this is worse. So I accepted that. This is going to hurt and I want to do it. Because I don't think it'll hurt forever. I bet I'm a little bit older and I can deal with it a little bit now, okay? So I think maybe we could look at it that same way as that, okay? And say that this is probably going to hurt a little bit. But I bet I can handle it today. I'm a little bit older, got a little bit more understanding, and I got some information you can't believe, called the teaching ideas. So maybe I can handle it. But don't lie to yourself and say it ain't going to hurt. That's not all it's going to do. I'm only focusing on this because this is the part people want to hide. The part you don't want to hide, I don't need to talk about, do I? It's right there, it's great. I'm not saying that's all it's going to be. I'm just saying be honest and admit that there is that aspect to it, okay? We went into that closet for a reason. Now, probably just like I did at 15 and later on in the early 20s when I realized the closet was a lot more than just a wall against emotions, I looked at some stuff again and I said, I still paid too big a price. It was just different, Now I realize, look at this personality I got. It's hiding me from the world too. And it's still too big a price and I don't want to pay it anymore. If you feel that way, then there's something you can do to get out of that closet. But I think you're going to have to be honest and say, I went into the closet for a reason. We have a tendency to spend so much time judging ourselves as stupid and foolish and all that sort of stuff that it's hard for us to say that. It's kind of funny in a way. Like, I did this for a reason, and it was good at the time. It was not bad or stupid or wrong or anything else. It was good at the time. It was probably a survival decision at the time. Who knows? I may have died over whatever it was then. But not now. Okay? Does that make sense? At this point, the first thing we're going to do is take what food is coming into us, which is the not I's description of reality, and say, this is not me, and it ain't true. I'm not sure why it's not true yet. I told you that experience of looking at the thing with the attention and disapproval and like being able to describe it, but not actually seeing the illusion. I did not know that the illusion of that was that I was not free to experience the pain of attention or being ignored and rejected and being disapproved of until I went out and did that little experiment, you see. I did not know what the illusion was. I just knew that there had to be some illusion here. This can't be true. That I can't handle. Okay? But I really didn't understand until I went out and did that experiment that the illusion was I can't handle it. I thought it was all sorts of other things with the mind, you see. The reasoned, rational, logical argument is wrong. I will agree with you, your logic is impeccable. Your ability to reason is impeccable.
And not sound.
But you started with garbage. And see, in the computer business, we got a term for that. You know what that is, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Because we deal with logic all the time. So we have to know that, because we stand there, and if we know that if our programs accept garbage, then we're going to have somebody down the way come running at us, screaming at us, telling us our program's no good. Because there's an experiential feedback. We ain't getting it, my friends. We're not getting that experiential feedback that says, that's garbage. We just sit and believe it. And that it's true. That's my reality. Whatever garbage that I've accepted as a faulty premise and reasoned from goes into the personality, and since all I know is what the personality tells me, it becomes reality to me. That's just the way it is. Okay? And the fact is, there's no way for me to see that it's not true, because all I can see is what the personality tells me. I'm stuck now. I can't even see any way out of this. If that weren't so, we wouldn't need folks playing the role that Phil plays. We could just plunk it down in the book, and that would be enough. We wouldn't need somebody to walk around and keep tapping the illusions on the shoulder and say, hey, wait, you ain't seeing it. Because a book can't do that, can it? It can't say, don't turn the page, you didn't get this one. And if you do, I'm going to make the rest of my pages blank. Because you didn't get this part, and if you don't get this part, then the rest is going to make sense. A book can't do that, can it? I can. See, another person can't. They can pay attention and see if it's getting through past the personality and say, no, you didn't get it. Now, of course, people tend to experience that as being attacked. I'm sorry, but that's what we need. Because we ain't even experiencing reality anymore. We're only experiencing the story that the personality tells us. And because the story comes with emotions, it's real. If it were just a story in the head, we'd probably be okay, huh? We could kind of look at it and say, oh, that's a goofy story. But when it comes with anger, or it comes with depression, or it comes with, I hate you, it's real, isn't it? So the teaching gives us this lovely description of the personality and says, start looking at every single thing that comes to you as your experience of reality and saying, you know, I bet this is a lie. I bet it's a lie. And look at the ideas of the personality and say, is this one of those 6 things? Is this me trying to be important? Then I know what it is. It's just the personality yapping at me. Hiding it behind a ton of words so the decision is not real clear and obvious all the time. Sometimes it's right there in front of your face. This is complaining. And sometimes it isn't so clear. Something? No. I gotta look a little bit. So we'll just start looking at everything that we think we're experiencing and saying, I think this is a lie. What's the worst that's going to happen? You'll find out it's true. Right? That's the worst that's going to happen is you'll find out, hey, that one wasn't. Boy, there's a problem, huh? If you treat everything as a lie, that's the worst that's going to happen is you'll find out you actually do know a couple things. And you'll gain a whole lot more wisdom and knowledge. But if I'm not willing to do that, if I'm just going to sit behind this little door and go ahead and let the personality describe reality to me so I can then describe it to X as if I were doing my job when I'm not, then I will live in lies for the rest of my time here. So the willingness to just say, I could be wrong about everything. It is possible that my education came from other people who were just as wrong as I am. Might mean that I might one day be someone who isn't wrong about everything. But if I ain't willing to do that, if I'm going to sit here in my need to be right all the time, then I guess I'll just never know that all my suffering is unnecessary. I don't need to do this. And wouldn't that be a funny joke on you? See? That what you want to do at the end of the life is look back over it and say, and it was all unnecessary. I didn't have to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to get to the end. Well, actually, I don't want to get to the end at all right now, but when it comes, I don't want to get there and look back and say, it was all unnecessary, all that suffering for nothing, because it was all based on lies.
What's an example of something that's true?
That I can experience being rejected.
That's not controlling when you would go and make the person reject you on purpose?
You better believe it is.
It's controlling.
Yep. Sure is.
But if they just rejected you just because, then it would be true, not because you made them reject you.
I have no problems using other people. I know that's considered to be a bad thing to do in this world. I have no problems with it. Doesn't bother me one bit. Just because today we have lost the difference between two words called use and abuse. Doesn't mean I gotta be stupid too. There's a big difference between using someone and abusing someone, okay? I want to be used. I don't know about you, but I want to be used. That's where half the fun in life comes from. You want to be in a relationship where somebody doesn't use you for anything? How'd you like to be in a romantic relationship where nobody wanted to use you for anything? The other person didn't want to. Huh? I want to use them for a couple things. How about you? And I kind of hope they want to use me. Otherwise, I don't know what we're going to do. I want to be used. I came here this weekend to be used. Use me. I'm a tool. When I'm playing this game, that's what I am. I'm a tool. I come here and say, use me, don't I? I just sit there with you and I say, what do you want to do? You can use me any way that I can be used. Okay? That's what I did this weekend, was came here and said, use me. I don't have any problems with that. Now, abuse, that's a little different. I do have a bit of a problem with abusing folks, okay? But I don't think that I really abuse them. This may sound goofy, and it may sound like a rationalization to you, but, I figure if it hadn't been me, it would have been the guy down the street doing that unconsciously a couple minutes later, okay? At least I knew what I was doing, so when they said, get out of here, I laughed. The guy down the street probably isn't going to do that. He's probably going to get real ticked that they rejected them and stand there and insist that they change. I didn't do that. I was pretty gentle about it, okay? I got what I came for and I took off because I knew I was being annoying. I was being annoying on purpose. But I don't see that as hurting anybody, There's plenty of annoying people in the world, whether I do it or not. So I have no problems using people so that I can understand something about the way life works. I won't abuse anyone. I mean, that's the whole point about doing something like this intentionally and consciously. You pay attention. If it looks like you're really going to hurt that person, take a hike. Don't use them. Because there are some people, they're a little fragile, and, maybe they're not the ones to use. So I kind of use some strong people, that wouldn't be hurt by what I did. I don't want to hurt anybody or abuse anybody. I was careful about that. But there are a lot of pretty insensitive people in this world, aren't there? I think we all know some, right? Where you could practically hit them, and it wouldn't really affect them too much. They'll just whop you back. So I've sort of picked on the insensitive people. They don't notice. Okay? But it's true. I have no problems with that. If you do, then don't do it. But I don't know how you're going to live in this world without being used and have any fun at all. Okay? I freely let it be used. I have certain guidelines, about acceptable use. I'll admit that. There are some things I maybe won't let you use me for, but I do freely allow use of me because that's where the fun in life is as far as I'm concerned, and I hope you'll do the same. We just won't step over that line into abuse, okay? That would be a good idea. Question everything that comes from the personality. That means every thought, every opinion, every belief, every emotion, every feeling, and say, is this true? And is there some way I can find out? Not by thought, not by logic. Because if what I'm saying is true, we don't know how much faulty information we're reasoning from, do we? We just don't know. So we can't do it with logic. What we can use the mind for is to set up a demonstration or an experiment that might help me to find out what the truth is. That I can do. I can sit down and think, now what could I do to discover the truth? What would make it clear? And I go do that. I believe that's called the scientific method last time I checked. It's a way to be objective in the midst of subjectivity, huh? You come up with an idea and you set up an experiment and see what happens. And the great thing about the scientific method is there's no failure. Because all you're trying to do is find out what's true. And no matter how the experiment goes, you're going to find out what's true. If the experiment fails, then the original idea was wrong, and now you know what's true. Or at least what isn't true, and you're further along the way. You can't fail in this game. It's great. Every experiment gives you information and helps you maybe set up the next one that's going to make it clear from experience, not from ideas or emotions. Now, there are, I know, higher aspects of both mind and emotions that are very rarely wrong. And you may have heard rumors about that. I don't mean you got it. Okay? If it ever happens, great. And you don't have to sit around and do all this kind of weird stuff. But in the meantime, until that develops in you, you might treat everything as probably wrong. And find out. Go do something to prove it wrong.
Can you experiment retrospectively?
You can if you actually had the experience. But if all you've got is the memory that the Not Eyes gave you, no, because the data is wrong. But yes, one can run through previous experiences and look for information, of course. But that kind of assumes that the memory of those previous experiences is accurate. And I know it disturbs us to hear what I'm saying, but I really am saying it's not. Because it's based on conclusions. We remember it the way we've concluded it was, We don't have the real information about what actually happened anymore. It's stored there, but it's not accessible. Every experience we ever have is stored, but it's not accessible to us right now under these conditions. All we can actually remember is our conclusions and our opinions that came from the not eyes about what happened. We don't have the information itself. When you start functioning a little bit better, kind of the way a human being was designed to function, then yeah, you can do that. But I'd be personally quite careful about it for a while, maybe a few months or so, until I start to grow a little bit and can do some of these things that are theoretically potentially possible, but not necessarily practically possible for me right now, okay? The experiments are always an attempt to prove something wrong, not to prove it right. Because that's what the not eyes are doing all the time anyway. Whatever weird idea they have, they go around looking for proof. And they find it. Of course, they ignore all the things that contradict it. So the idea is to look for contradictions, not for agreement. To find some way to set it up so that you can prove that thing wrong. So the not eyes said, you can't be rejected. You've got to do something about it. You just can't sit there and be rejected. You've got to do something about it to change it. So I went out to prove it wrong. And I did it by going out and being rejected over and over and over again and did nothing about it. And after a while I said, no, you guys are wrong. I don't have to change it. I can just let it be. I can just let it happen. I don't have to change it. You're wrong when you say that. It's true I don't like it. But it's not true that I have to do something about it. But I would never have known that if I hadn't gone out and tried to prove them wrong when they said, you've got to fix this. You've got to get this person to like you again. You can't just walk off and leave them hating your guts. That's what they say, isn't it? You can't do that. You gotta do something about it. Well, actually, I don't.
Just as an aside, does that energy change that you affected? Does that color the quality of the rejection in the other person?
Well, it doesn't get as drug out because I'm willing to leave. When they reject me, I leave. So, yeah, it's just a short little event for them instead of a traumatic thing. I mean, look at all the lengths we will go to keep from rejecting people because we know what's going to happen. Isn't that right? They're going to bug us for the next 6 months. And we know it. So we think of all these little ways that we can get them to see it for themselves or trick them or all the weird social stuff we go through just to keep from going up and saying to somebody, I really don't like being around you anymore. Could you leave? I used to, but I don't anymore. And it happens, doesn't it? Sometimes, you really like somebody, and after a while you look at them one morning and you just say, I don't like you anymore. That's just what it is to be human. Big deal. So what? Look at the lengths we go to, because we know what we're in for if we're the one doing the rejecting and disapproving. Isn't that right? And we use it, of course, a lot to control people, don't we? These days, most child rearing is about withholding approval until the kid does what you want, or disapproving of them until they do. And then we wonder why most kids grow up thinking that they're unloved. But that's the modern method of raising kids, isn't it? You can't hit them anymore. That's bad. The only other thing we can think to do is to play around with approval. Because we've got to do something to get their attention. I'd rather hit them. That's a short little pain, you know, and it doesn't say, I hate you, if you don't do it in anger. This modern method doing it that says, if you don't do the right thing, I'm going to disapprove of you. All it does is mean that we grow up thinking we're unlovable. Nobody can ever love me. Yeah? And so we all walk around thinking, not all of us, but an awful lot of us these days walk around believing that we are not lovable because of the way that our parents disciplined us. I'd rather get hit. Try to prove it wrong. Do something that will prove it wrong. Whatever the self tells you. See if you can come up with something to do that will prove the self's idea wrong. As a dear fellow once said, it is the truth that sets man free. I believe I read that somewhere once. How about you? The difficulty is that we can't get at the truth in our current state because we only get the information that comes from a lying personality. So if we want that freedom that comes from seeing the truth of the matter, we're going to have to go about it by looking for illusions, not by looking for the truth. You ain't going to find it that way, because you wouldn't know the truth if it bit you on the nose right now. What's that old saying? If it were a snake, it would have bit you. So if you want to know the truth, look for illusions. And when all the illusions on the subject have been seen as lies, the truth is just what's left. It's the stuff you couldn't prove wrong. And it's just sitting there right in front of you, and now you can see it. But when you're looking through those illusions, what you see is the illusions. Okay? So try to prove your own illusions wrong. And what'll be left is the truth. And that's what brings freedom for human beings. I didn't make this one up, did I? I think this was said about 2,000 years ago. Okay? It is the truth that sets man free. Not ideas, not beliefs, not new behaviors called self-improvement methods. Truth. Okay? And then maybe we can get out of that closet and start to grow up on the real part of ourselves instead of in the personality, which is, I think, probably gotten old enough. Doesn't need any more growing up. Okay? So this is the beginning of working with this information, all right? To discover the truth of where I am, to look at the illusions of the self, which are old decisions that I made that seemed to me to be true at the time, but I didn't have enough information or understanding to really know. They were all made a long time ago and have just gotten more sophisticated over the years, okay? You know what that word means, right? You probably know. I think they still use it that way in England. You know what it is in French, right? Removed from naturalness. Now in this country we've decided that's a great thing. So we mutated the word that says to be unnatural as all get out into chic and glamorous. But that's all that the self has done. It has not really grown. It's just gotten more and more sophisticated, more and more unnatural. When it was a little 2 and 3 and 4-year-old doing this, that's perfectly natural, you see. When it's a 20 and a 30 and a 40 and a 50-year-old doing this, it ain't so natural no more. Okay? It's just kind of complicated and sophisticated. See, I learned that when I worked with some translation stuff back when I still read other languages a little bit okay. And I talked to the other translators, and I asked them they were talking actually, and they said the word that they had the most trouble with in the English language was the word sophisticated, because we did a lot of technical documentation, okay? And we Americans love to say this is a sophisticated machine, which to us means that it does everything for you, like you just push one button and the rest just happens by automation, you see. That's what sophistication means to us. But in just about every other romantic language, if you translate that literally, it would mean it's so complicated you can't use it. So you got to come up with these strange words every time somebody says it's sophisticated, you see. Because that just means this is so weird and unnatural and complicated, you couldn't figure it out if you tried. But the American culture is a little interesting. I've spent a bit of time looking at what words actually mean, in case you haven't kind of figured that out. I sort of used them the way they were originally set up. And it fascinates me to see the way that we use them today, because you notice this language is probably a little archaic when I get out of the slang a bit. I use the words the way they originally were, because they were pretty accurate then. They actually described reality then. Today they describe nothing at all, except a cultural belief. It's very interesting to find out what a word means, and then see how it's used today. You'll learn a whole lot about the culture that you live in, and the illusions and myths and taboos that it thinks are real.
Charity.
Excuse me?
Charity. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, there's just a ton of them. Just a ton of them. Okay. Any questions or comments about this? This beginning thing we call self-knowing. And you get it by observing, by looking, with some information. That's what the teaching ideas are for, just give you a way to look. Because in the middle of this little closet with all these hallucinations coming at you as reality, we don't even know what to look for. So the teaching says, no problem, we'll describe it. You'll know what to look for. But it says, look. Pay attention. See what's going on. Know the self. The intent, by the way, is to know what you're not. That's what self-knowing has always meant and still means. Find out what you're not. Because hopefully the next thing we'll do is start working at finding out what I am. But if I think I'm a tree, I'm going to have a hard time figuring out what I am. Isn't that right? Until I'm willing to look through the illusion I built of me, how am I ever going to find me? Okay? Or if I think I'm that little butterfly of the great Chinese king, I just dearly love this story. It's told as this great teaching story, you've heard this story. Once upon a time, there was a great and wise Chinese king who woke up one morning saying, oh my God, I dreamed that I was a butterfly, and it was so real. Why, I could taste the nectar, I could feel the air under the wings as I was flying around. How do I now know whether I'm a man, or a butterfly dreaming I'm a man, or last night I was a man dreaming I'm a butterfly? And it's like, buddy, you belong in an institution. You're cuckoo. Can't tell our damn dream from reality. See? And I suspect if it's a teaching story, that's the point. I don't think we're supposed to reflect on, yes, how do I know whether I'm a butterfly dreaming I'm a man? I think it's like, do you get it? You can't tell! Okay. So we start looking for what I'm not. That's to know the false self. Not to fix it, not to make it better, not to make fun of it, not to do anything but say, if I know what I'm not, I may one day be able to see what I am. Okay? That's the only point. So it is to be done without judgment of any kind. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just the way it is. You'll get it if you work at it. It may sound impossible, but it can be done. If you set it up as I got to do this, all that will happen is 4 and 5 will make you miserable. Because I know you're going to fail when you first try. So what? I believe you do a little thing called practicing. You fake it till it's real. You can't do it on the first try. Big deal. 4 and 5 will want to come up and say, the authority told you you have to do this, and 5 will say, and you're a piece of crap because you can't. All right, then you look at that and say, well, there goes the self. I'm not going to judge it, and I'm not going to condemn it, and I'm not going to make up stories to justify it and make it pretty and okay. I'm just going to say, this is the false self. This is not I. And I'm doing this because I want to one day know what I am. I don't want to go on believing that I'm all this stuff. Okay? I want to know what I am. I want to be the one who's here doing what I'm doing, not some false thing. Okay? That's the only reason why I'm doing it. Other than that, I have no interest in this. I'm not interested in repairing it or fixing it or anything, okay? If it's got some little part, as I like to remind, that is truly destructive, by all means, feel free to monkey with it, okay? But basically, leave it alone. It is not a machine, although it behaves mechanically. It is not a machine. It's a process in life. So the odd thing is that if you tinker with it and start repairing it and fixing it, it wises up that you're watching it, and it hides. And you're going to make your job a whole lot harder. Because it don't like being looked at. When it gets too much attention put on it, it can't function. Which, by the way, is another one of the difficulties of this. The more you observe, the more it breaks, and then you can't see it. And then when you stop looking, it starts cranking up again. So you've got to be kind of clever about it. You've got to kind of sneak up on it and let it do its thing, you know. And then say, I see you. And then it goes, and then you got to kind of like hide from it for a little while until it gets cranked up again, thinks you're not looking, goes out and does it, and then you open up your eyes again and say, I see you. Because it don't like being watched. But then neither do I. So that's not surprising. When I used to work on computers, repairing them, I would often tell people, you know, who want to watch and kibitz with you and ask you questions and so on. I would often tell them, you know, my rates are different if you watch. You can do it, I don't mind, it's okay. But I do charge extra for that. Because I don't particularly like it, you. So I figure if I got to do it, I might as well make some money off my disturbance. I don't mind. You can disturb me if you like, but you're going to pay for the privilege, okay? It was interesting how often they suddenly disappeared when I told them it was costing them money to stand there. Self is the same way. It doesn't particularly like being watched while it works, okay? But you can catch it off guard enough that you can start to see what you're not. Any questions or comments? I think it's about time for food, don't you? Okay. They tell me I'm quitting at 4 today.